Hi, I'm Brooklyn Tony, and this is the summary video of the SRP-2. It is a straight Talon fed half-dart blaster using Nightingale flywheels, 130 motors, with a mechanical pusher and its party trick of slide blowback. Now, this is a very finicky build, and I wouldn't recommend this to any beginners. This shouldn't be your first project because it requires a lot of sanding to get the pusher and the dart guide correct, and it's not easy in terms of getting it to work. However, printability is pretty good. A lot of these parts require very little to no supports, and everything can be printed on an Ender 3 size printer, so 220 by 220 by 250 millimeter build volume. However, the only few parts that would really need support are this big one would be the grip, and some things like the slide that print vertically do need a lot of support at the bottom to get it from falling over. However, other than that, it's better than a desert pigeon, and that's what this design was basically going for. Basically a modernized, what would I do differently if I had to design a desert pigeon style blaster, which would be straight Talon fed, blowback, and a micro flywheeler. Now, of course, I'm using Nightingale flywheels because, one, they are quite cheap, and they're a lot smaller than some of the other flywheels on the market today. This allowed me to actually get this thing pretty slim in terms of a flywheeler. Now, it's not necessarily like Nightingale slim, but this is a pretty slim blaster, especially when you consider that this is a X-shot long shot in comparison, and when you look at the thickness, they're pretty close. Now, some of the big things about this blaster is the dart ramp. That means you have to angle the darts like this and get them straight because the grip is angled. And of course, if you look, that's not straight with the barrel. So the darts have to pop up slightly, which is accomplished using a pusher that tries to realign the dart by pushing it down slightly, and a ramp. And that ramp and pusher, this whole mechanism over here, basically the firing components, well, and the recoil system, are the main issues with why this thing is so hard to build. Getting those all to work smoothly is not easy, and this is why I say this is basically a first edition of the blaster, because there are some things that could be improved, but I would need a lot more testing from a lot more people to tell me. Of course, we also have the mag release. It's ambidextrous. This slide release can go on the other side. There's a piece for that. You could technically put one on both sides, though that isn't necessarily the cool factor realistic thing to do. Although having one maybe on the left or the right would be better for you if you're left or right-handed. And being left-handed like I am, probably having it on the left side would be better, but I have it on the right side for now because on using my offhand I would hit the slide release. Not that it does anything because the slide is independent from the pusher mech, so it doesn't. You don't have to lock the slide back to load the blaster. But yeah, of course, as you can see, sometimes you have some issues with the trigger. It likes to rev itself if you do some things like slam a magazine in too far, because it pushes the pusher slightly forward because the pusher is pushing down on the dart, and thus it comes off the rev switch. But it does fire. Pretty effectively, although as you can tell, I short stroked the trigger once in there and that caused a jam. You cannot short stroke this trigger, otherwise the dart will jam up on the feed ramp. That is one of the main drawbacks to this entire design, and it would require an entire redesign just to fix that issue, so I don't think I'm going to do that. I've just lived the knowing that in like real firearms, you shouldn't short stroke the trigger. You have to let it reset. That also goes for the recoil mech, because if I and don't let it reset, it doesn't really pick up the slide. Of course, these 10 rounders are what I designed to have fit flush with the grip. So this is your pistol form. Drop free mag, of course. But these 18 rounds and basically any straight Talon will fit. Katanas, we have talked over the dimensions on Discord. They should, no, not katanas. Other mags that are Talon profile should fit, including this 18 round worker curved Talon mag. This actually, for whatever reason, feeds better than those 10 rounders. And I think that's because these 10 rounder springs are pretty stiff compared to these 18 rounders. But then again, I expect you probably all to have more of these 18 rounders in some capacity, either the straight or the curved, than these 10 rounders, since, yeah, 18 rounds. Of course, this isn't a small pistol by any means. For example, that is the SRP-1K, which I also designed. It is almost the same length, and thickness-wise, the SRP is slightly thicker, but it doesn't have to deal with a mag in the grip, so yeah. And also, this thing physically is more ergonomic compared to this thing in times. And also, even more for comparison, is a Zero X-Shot long shot. This isn't a small pistol. This is basically the size of a real-life HK Mark 23 SOCOM, or almost the size of a Desert Eagle. So it's not small. I wouldn't necessarily ever say to run this in a war unless you really are that LARPer aesthetic, which I know some of you are. And I definitely wouldn't necessarily take this outside in this dark of a color scheme or print filament scheme. This, although yeah, you are holding what looks like a real steel pistol. Even with the orange tip, having this pointed at you with the aesthetics of it, yeah, that's going to be mistaken as a firearm. Print this in some bright colors, brighter than I have now. I don't personally have any wars that I'm able to go to locally, and I don't even take this out of the house, so this dark color scheme is fine for me, and is more of an example of the color choices you can make, differentiating the primary colors, the secondary, and the orange. And you better not print this without an orange tip, unless you only keep it inside your house, and even sometimes then away from windows. Because I know of some people who have had the cops called on for playing around with something that looks too much like a real firearm. But yeah, this is the SRP-2, a cool recoiling blowback pistol.